Hello to my online learners. Today we are going to look at Chapter 11. Now, Chapter 11 is the nervous system, and I'm breaking it down into two groups, into the central nervous system, which is the brain and the spinal cord, and then the peripheral nervous system, which is all the nerves that come off the brain or the spinal cord. So there's a lot of terminology and a lot of definitions. So take it chunk by chunk and make sure you watch the additional videos for help. Okay, so when we look at it, basically the body has two ways of communicating. It's got the fast, lightning fast chemical, uses electrical signals. And that is the nervous system. Electrical signals transmit messages at lightning speeds, and then chemicals are used in between nerves. Then there's the endocrine system, and the endocrine system uses hormones to communicate. It is slower, it is long-lasting, and it uses chemicals. And both of them interact, and most body parts are affected by both. Okay, we're going to look at the nervous system to begin with, and then in Chapter 13, we will look in the endocrine system. Now, when you're looking at the nervous system, basically there's three essential roles: to sense it, to sense the stimulus around you, and that's using your sense organs, your eyes, your ears, your nose, your receptors in your finger, something that detects the changes outside, and we'll talk about that a little later on when we talk about sensing in Chapter 12. Then the brain must integrate the material, and in terms of integrating it, it receives it, it must relate the experience to past experience, and then determine what is the appropriate behavior here. And then the nervous system will respond by communicating, sending signals to muscles, sending signals to glands to originate things. And then as it gets to the glands, then glands can excrete hormones if necessary. So that's what we're looking at there. Now, when it comes to the term nervous system, there are many parts to the nervous system. So let's look at the first part. The first part is the central nervous system versus the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system is the brain and the spinal cord, and all the parts of the brain, all the parts of the spinal cord. Then the peripheral nervous system is the vast network of nerves that come out of the off the spinal cord or off the brain. Okay, now when you look at it, there's a lot of terms for the word nervous system, and then they're broken down more. So let's look at all these terms so you can see how they interrelate. So the central nervous system, let me have to pull this up if I can. The central nervous system has the brain and the spinal cord, and that's all that's broken down there. The peripheral nervous system breaks down, and then that breaks down, and then that breaks down, and there's different layers. And it's important you get an idea of what make up what layers, so this way you can understand the workings a little better. So the peripheral nervous system is all the all the nerves outside the brain and the spinal cord. Let me get my pointer because I so like writing on things. So peripheral nervous system, the PNS. Now, if you are sensory and you move to the central nervous system, it is the afferent or the sensory nervous system. Then there is the motor division or the efferent, and that moves from the central nervous system. So think that you got to take all the information in, and that you're taking it from your sense organs. Then you send it out to your motors. Okay? Now, if we look at the sense organs are somatic, which is sort of body, and visceral, which is guts. So somatic is skin, bones, muscles, and joints. And these are they have pretty sensitive receptors in this area. Then the visceral nervous system, or the visceral sensory nervous system, the receptors aren't as central. They're not as fast. And quite often there's more than one nerve coming from more than one organ. So it's really hard to take senses in. And this is why sometimes you can have referred pain where you think it's your heart, but really or it could be your stomach. Hence the term heartburn. Okay? So sensory is broken down into somatic, which is body, and visceral, which is gut. Good. Then let's look at the motor. The motor is broken down into somatic, which is voluntary. So what is voluntary motor or voluntary movement? That's the skeletal muscles. Then you have autonomic, or this sometimes is abbreviated the ANS, or the autonomic nervous system. And it's automatic and it's involuntary. So these are all the other things, your heartbeat, your blood pressure, all the things that happen automatically. And you know what? It's the muscle tissue that happens automatically. So this is your cardiac and your smooth muscle. Good. So we've got our somatic motor, which controls our sensory and we think about it. Sorry, controls our skeletal and we think about it. Then there's the automatic nervous system, and that's broken down again to sympathetic and parasympathetic. So sympathetic is called fight or flight. Now, they've added a new one to that one that isn't in this textbook. Sometimes it's fight, flight, or freeze. So your body gets so overwhelmed, and that's why when some people are in a very panicky situation, they will freeze. So fight and flight. That is the fight or flight. Ooh, that's pretty ugly. Then the parasympathetic is called rest and digest. So this is a system that slows down the body. And instead of thinking all the details at them at this level, think, what would happen to make your body fight or flight? So you're going to increase your breathing. You're going to increase your heart rate. You're going to increase the blood flow to your muscles and out of your guts. Then rest and digest. You're going to calm down your breathing, calm down your heart rate, and send the blood to your gut. So this way it can digest. Okay. So make sure you know the order of this, order and the levels, not only because it makes a really good multiple choice question, but it also helps keep things a little straighter. And yeah, it is a tricky level because everything sounds the same. It's got the word nervous system in it, and there's a lot of somatic. Okay, but take the effort to learn it now and it'll make things smoother later on. Okay. So let's first, do we look at the nerve and then the neuroglia? Where do we look at the nerve? Okay, so let's look at the neuroglia first. So the nervous system has two types of tissue. The neuroglia, which support and protect. And there's different types. So the only one in the peripheral nervous system is the Schwann cells, and these are the myelinated sheaths. So you know how you've got your axon coming out and then you've got this donut-y roll here? I'll show it to you later when there's another picture. Actually, there's a really good picture in the textbook. I'll take you there in a bit. But this is a good summary. No, let's go to the textbook, and then this way we're not playing the guess what's in my head game. One moment. Let's get out of here. Okay. Textbook. In the textbook, there's a really good summary table right here. And the names they're Latin. Depending on your Latin, we're good. Okay, so the neuroglia of the central nervous system, there are 4 types. One is oligodendrites. Now, oligo means few. So that means one neuron will affect, one cell will affect a few neurons. So this, the function of it is to speed it up and myelinate the brain and spinal cord. to make it faster. But notice if this cell dies, you have now put holes in 3 neurons in this example. So this is why damage into the myelin in the central nervous system is more serious than in the peripheral nervous system. So oligo means few. So it's a few dendrocytes. So it kind of goes to a few. To me, it kind of looks like the Star Trek Starship Enterprise, kind of. Okay, oligodendrites, myelinate for speed. Now, ependymal cells, notice that they're kind of columnar with these microvilli on the, or the cilia on the top. So the cilia is to move stuff. So these are the ones that are moving fluid. Now, the fluid in your brain area is called your cerebrospinal fluid, and they will help it. So these line the spinal cord and the cavities in the brain, and they secrete cerebrospinal fluid, which is the fluid that goes around the brain. We'll talk about that later. And it helps move. Ependymal, they kind of, I don't know, there's really no way to memorize this other than it kind of sounds like, yeah, ependymal, epi, I think epipen, I don't know, whatever you can do. But I remember it because of these little cilia help move fluid. Fluid is cerebrospinal fluid. So these are the ones that create or secrete cerebrospinal fluid. Then there is a microglia, and these to me look like splats. But look how many little arms they have. And the whole idea of the microglia is these are phagocytotic. So these will engulf microorganisms and cellular debris inside the brain and the spinal cord. Very important. Then the other one, the last one, is an astrocyte. Astro meaning star, like astronaut is someone who goes to the stars. An astrocyte, the idea between an astrocyte is it's the cells that connect the brain tissue to the blood vessel. So if you see here, this red long thing is the blood vessel, and the green thing is the astrocyte. So make sure you know these cells. Make sure you know their functions. Now, the astrocytes are important for the blood-brain barrier, which we'll talk about later, but the whole idea of the blood-brain barrier is to keep a separation so things don't get into the brain that you don't want it in there, because it's very sensitive tissue. And there's some huge amount of the brain blood flow that goes to the brain. I want to say 15, but it could be 20. A lot of your blood goes to your brain. Okay? Astrocytes, don't they look like little cells that would, you put a neuron in there? So you've got your neuron above it. So they're kind of little connectors between the blood vessels and the neurons. So these are the ones that feed the brain cells. Good. So there are 4 in the central nervous system. And there is only 1 in the peripheral nervous system, and that is the Schwann cell, named after Dr. Schwann, I assume. And these are the ones that are the myelinated sheath that go around the nerve. Now, notice here is the good word neurolemma. Neuro meaning nerve, and then lemma is like plasmalemma. It's basically a coating. Okay, so these are your 5 type of neuroglia. And neuroglia, as we talk about here, somewhere back. Your neuroglia protect the body. Okay, so there's a nice summary slide for you if you want to look at it. And again, summarize, summarize, summarize. So then when you look at the blood-brain barrier, the blood-brain barrier is formed by the astrocytes, which wrap around the capillaries, and they protect the brain from foreign substances. And they kind of form a separation layer between the capillaries and the neurons. The most numerous of all, I'd say microglia. Oh, I'm wrong. Astrocytes. I didn't look at that. Okay. Now, neurons. So 2 types of nervous tissue, neuroglia, which protect and support, and neurons. And the neurons are the excitable, communicatable tissues. And there's 3 types, sensory, And we've learned that sensory go from the sense organs to the central nervous system. Interneurons, which are connective in the nervous system, usually in the spinal cord, and motor neurons, which relay the messages back out. So let's look at, this is just a motor neuron. This isn't the mixture of them. One moment, please, as I jump back and forth. Okay, if we jump back to the textbook, there is a good diagram of the 3 types of neurons. And these neurons, they also have multi-names to them, but they're found in different areas. So since we talked about the sensory neuron first, well, let's go to the top. This is basically the normal neuron that we talk about as the main type of neuron. They're multipolar neurons. So that means you've got more than one end to it. So usually you have one axon, but you have a bunch of information coming in. These are most common, and these are most of the neurons in the brain and spinal cord, and these are mainly motor neurons because they collect the information and then they send it out. Also, being myelinated, they're very efficient at getting information out. Okay, then you've got, this is the interneuron because you've got a process coming in and a process going out. These are bipolar because they have 2 poles, pretty much. Then you have unipolar because you only have, it looks like you have 2 axons. And these are the ones used in the sensory nervous system. And the way I remember, look at where the head is, or the cell body. So here, oh, I don't have a pointer anymore, sorry. Here you have a, oh, look at that, I can draw now. Here is the cell body, and this is the motor neuron. So notice how the cell body's at one end. Here you have the cell body up at the top, and to me that kind of looks like something from Monsters. This is the sensory neuron. Now, often these neurons are found in a ganglion. And when we look at the spinal cord ganglion, we will look at the location of ganglion as it goes into the nervous system, or from the spinal cord to, or into the spinal cord. Okay, so those are 3 types, motor, so there's kind of double meaning. You've got the motor, sensory, and interneuron, and then you have the multipolar, bipolar, and unipolar, and they kind of describe what they look like. So it's relatively easy that way. Good. Oh, no, I gotta shut this off. How do I do that again? There we go. Okay. Now, let's look at the general parts of the cell, the neuron. And most of you know this from the introductory unit and bio whatever. Okay. This is big. I don't like it this way. And that doesn't have the detail I want. Okay, I can tell you the detail I want. Okay. Here is the structure of a neuron. Notice this is a motor neuron, but they all have similar parts. They're just slightly different. So you have the cell body, and the cell body has the nucleus in. So here's the nucleus. Here's the cell body. The cell body is the area of integration. Then you have dendrites, and information goes in through dendrites. And then it goes out through the axon. And it's very important, or very unique to nerve cells, in the fact that the information only goes one way. It can't go backwards, and we'll talk about why it can't go backwards when we talk about the nerve impulse. But the information is only going one way, from dendrite to axon. And depending on the type of cell, you can have more than one dendrite. And usually you don't have more than one axon, but quite often, well, That's how it works. And then there can or cannot be a myelinated sheath. Now, if this is a peripheral nervous system, this is a Schwann cell that forms the neural lemma. Schwann. Bad spelling. Okay, Schwann cell. Then the axon will terminate in a synaptic knob, also called a synaptic bubble, also called an axon terminal, depending on the textbook we look at. Now, we looked at this initially when we looked at the muscle. So here was the muscle and the neuromuscular junction, and the axon bulb or axon knob actually stimulated right to the nervous, or the nerve. No, not the nerve, the muscle. Okay? Now, myelin has a couple of functions. One is for protection, but the other thing is to speed things up. And if you look at the way things are wrapped, it's one cell that goes around and around and around, around and around and around and around, kind of like a jelly donut, where this one kind of goes around, but slightly different. So in the Schwann cell, one Schwann cell is on one axon. In the central nervous system, remember the word oligo means few. I can't think of any other oligo words right now that you'd understand, but it might come to me. So this cell goes to a few neurons, and if for any reason this cell doesn't work, you would affect 1, 2, 3 axons, which would affect quite a bit of functioning. The myelinated sheath, or the myelin sheath, is very lipid, high in lipid, or very fatty, and that's what gives its white shiny appearance. Next time you have chicken wings, right beside the bone you'll see kind of a grayish one, a grayish line, which is the blood vessel, and then beside it you see a shiny one, and the shiny one is the nerve, because the myelin helps protect it. Now, when we talk about conduction is the word I'm trying to say. The myelin protects it and also allows the impulses to jump. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we actually look at the nervous impulse. Okay? Oh, here's a good question for you. See if I can answer this one. Which neuron detects sensations and relays the information to the central nervous system? Detects sensations and relays stimulus to. So it's not interneurons. It's not Schwann cells. Is it efferent or afferent? The answer is C, because it's alphabetical. No. Yeah. C. Okay, good. Efferent. It's alphabetical. Afferent is towards, efferent is away. Okay? That's good. I thought I got it wrong. Okay. Impulse conduction. What are we at? We're at 23 minutes. So I'm going to stop here because conduction is a crazy, crazy term. So take a break and get ready for conduction and action potential and nervous potential, because it's huge and crazy. So take a break and join me later.